Hey everybody, it's Kurt Zerby with Kurt Zerby Real Estate Group, and there have been some significant changes in the real estate world beginning this last Saturday, August 17th. This comes from a class action lawsuit against the National Association of Realtors that was filed actually in 2018 and finally came to an end earlier this year. And the National Association of Realtors had to pay out $456 million to the plaintiffs. And this was about commissions that come from the buyer's side of a transaction. They felt like that it wasn't transparent. Buyers didn't know that they were really participating in that in any way. They really didn't understand how their broker was getting paid. Typically, in the real estate business, a broker, let's say, such as me, will list a home for sale, and then I let all the other agents or brokers in the community know it's available. So if they have a buyer, they can bring the buyer, sell the house, and participate in some commissions. And the way it would work is this seller would be obligated to pay me a certain amount of money, a percentage, if we sold a home. And then out of that money, I would give typically 50% of that to this broker who worked with the buyer. So sellers typically have their own broker, buyers have their own broker. And they all, of course, like to be paid. That's how we make our living. And so we had a system to where we would pay the buyer broker out of our funds. The buyer never paid a dime. The buyer was never obligated to pay a dime. The buyer was never even involved in the discussion at all about a buyer broker being paid. They were just never involved in that negotiation. So the rules have changed now to where they want to include the buyer in that loop so they know what's going on. That portion of what's being paid out pays the broker that the buyer is working with. So buyers, there will be some changes this year, and it's going to obligate buyers. And if you're looking to buy a home right now, you need to pay attention to what I'm about to say, because you will have to do this. The new rules now say that buyers have to sign an agreement with their buyer broker, whoever that may be for you, obligating you to pay your buyer broker a certain amount of money for their services. It's scary for buyers. When I first heard this, I thought that's going to scare every buyer out of the market. Buyers don't typically have that kind of cash in their pocket to pull out and pay their broker. That's why most people borrow a lot of money when they buy a home, because they have to borrow. They don't have the cash saved up. So you will have to sign an agreement before they can even tour a home with you. You can't go look at a home with a broker today unless you've signed an agreement with them. That's the rule that we all have to live with. So if you're looking right now, please don't be surprised. You need to expect that your broker is going to ask you for that agreement. Now, in that agreement, it says that there's a certain, let's say, percentage or flat fee amount you're willing to pay your buyer broker, and you're obligated. It says you're the one obligated to pay him. However, that agreement also has a section in it that you will likely be checking, and the buyer broker knows that it says that you instruct your broker, your buyer broker, to go get your money from the seller or the listing broker, which is what has always happened. It's the same thing. It's just now you're just involved in the loop, so you understand what's happening. So you're gonna say, I agree, I owe it, but I'm instructing my broker to go get it from them. And so when you make an offer to buy a home, you will include that in your contract for the owner of a home to pay your buyer broker for representing you. It's pretty simple, but it definitely changes the dynamics. The biggest thing for buyers is you have to make a decision now on who you want to work with as a buyer broker. It becomes much more significant. On the seller's side, people who own a home that has been listed for sale, they are going to have not much in changes. It's going to be pretty much the same for them, but they may be a little more empowered now to negotiate a little harder with their agent when they do get an offer. So you're definitely, as a buyer, you're going to need a really good broker to work with. You have two choices when you sign up with a broker. One is called a buyer's agency or buyer listing contract, and the other one is a brokerage disclosure to the buyer. In the brokerage disclosure, these are significantly different. In the brokerage disclosure to the buyer, it simply tells you what he can or he or she can or cannot do for you. And it's pretty limited. If they don't have an agreement with you, it's pretty limited what they can do. However, if you sign a buyer agency agreement with them, which is highly recommended for anybody, especially now, that you hire a broker as your licensed agent to represent you, to advocate for you, to negotiate for you, to get you the best deal. You need them to do that, especially today. So I'm going to highly recommend you, when you meet with your broker, make sure you sign a buyer listing agreement, which obligates you and the buyer broker together. You now have a business relationship. That's your broker. Same rules apply though. He will now be instructed, or he or she will be instructed, to go to the listing agent, the seller, to get paid. That's what you're telling them they've got to do. So you don't have to come up out of pocket with it. Doesn't mean you're not obligated, but that's what you're told to go do. And then that becomes a negotiation in the contract. Not much different really in the end. It's going to wind up being about the same amount of money. It's still going to be the seller who's paying out all that money. In sellers, you need to know that. It won't change much for you at all. You'll still be paying that one rate that you expect to pay, that your broker put in your listing agreement. Unless, of course, the buyer broker wants less and is trying to take less, and that's fine. But if a buyer broker is trying to take more, you can just simply say, no, I'm not going to pay extra on it. Here's what we're going to pay. So the seller can also establish all he's willing to pay to the buyer broker as well. It all just gets negotiated. So for right now, I just need you guys to know how business is going to take place. Buyers, you will have to sign an agreement with a broker to even look at houses, not to talk about them. You eventually need to, but you'll need to have that agreement in place, signed by you and your buyer broker before you can go look at a house. Sellers, not much difference for you. You won't see much of a difference in how business takes place, except that it's now compensation, not commission. How the compensation will get negotiated in the purchase contract. Other than that, there really won't be a lot of changes. Be alert, watch for that. I plan on preparing a much more detailed presentation on this here really soon, with some slides and detailed work that you guys can screenshot and take pictures of and try to get a handle on this. But if you have any questions, get a hold of me, get a hold of another broker, your broker, and talk to them about this and find out what's next for you. That's a quick update on the market. I hope I didn't confuse you too much. I tried not to throw a fire hose information at you. I tried to keep it as minimal as I could. So if you have questions, be sure you get a hold of somebody. Thanks, everybody. Bye.